You have been talking about priorities. Can you give us some hints how do you prioritize things and how do you decide what's the important thing at a certain time?
Priorities. Yeah. So so the one thing, your team is something. It's always very fragile. You know, your team is always fragile. There's always something going on. There's always other opportunities, especially if you have really good engineers. They've got an opportunity to go to Google. They have an opportunity to work for Amazon. It happened with us. We always had guys who were just getting unsolicited offers to get paid twice as much as we were paying them at other companies. So you have to be vigilant with your team. Make sure that they're getting what they need and that they're being inspired to be there, right? Because there's no way you'll ever be able to beat these large salaries that these other companies are paying. So you have to find a way to inspire these people, and you have to do this all the time. You have to make sure the team is close, that you guys do things together. And one thing, I have a team whose CEO has gone through 3 CTO partners and has flipped his entire team about twice. Fully turned his entire team about twice, except for one guy. And of course, you know, it's on some level a singular event because he had one co-founder who literally went insane, disappeared, trashed the entire code base, and then killed his cell phone, just disappeared off the face of the planet. So that's a unique situation. But after that, he continued to have difficulty bringing people onto his team. So it made me wonder, did you make the guy go insane? It might be you, right? And what I had spending more time with his team recently, I found that he doesn't reward them. He forces, you know, he pushes them, get the work done. We need to make it to code complete and launch. And then right at the point they're going to launch, he finds a bunch more bugs and says, we can't launch yet. So he's done this like for 9 months. They are off their schedule for 9 months. And guys are coming to him and saying, hey, you know, I'm not sure if this is the right career move for me. You know, I'm thinking about going back to school, which is a passive-aggressive way of saying, this place fucking sucks, right? The pressure's too high and I'm not getting rewarded. They're just nicely, in an engineering kind of way, saying, I think I'm gonna do something that doesn't make me want to shoot myself in the face, right? So there's a time in which you push your team, but then there's a time that you stop and you appreciate what you guys have accomplished. You stop everything. No more coding, no more marketing, no more debugging, and you just have a beer with everybody and you celebrate because you need to acknowledge what you've just accomplished as a team and keep the team together. Team dynamics incredibly important, so prioritize that. The other thing too is because you guys have been so focused on building an application or a product to just get out the door, the tendency is to continue to focus on the product forever. So you're like, oh, something's not working, so let's add more features because we're not getting the response that we want from the market. We launched it and no one's using it. Well, have you done any marketing, right? Have you bought a Google ad campaign? Have you talked to your friends about using it? Oftentimes we default to product development because we're used to it, we're comfortable with it, there's a lot of control there, you can fix it, you can change it, right? Marketing is what will get your company to the next level, but it's really hard to figure out what's going to work there. And many of you haven't been trained as marketers, probably have worked in big companies where you had to work with marketers who were somewhat idiots. Lots of marketers are idiots, right? And so you may have an adverse opinion about that activity. But ultimately, it's marketing that makes you successful, right? So once you have launched your product, prioritize getting people to use it. That is not product development. It is market development. And it will be painful for you, but that is the other priority.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a few more questions. We had interesting discussion about launch strategies, either developing your app or then trying to figure out how it will work, or just starting something simple and just going in the market, talking to people, or follow up the discussion. If you can say a few words about your view on launch strategies, instead of building something for a long time, or going to the people with a simple prototype, or how you see that?
Yeah, so there are products and technologies that have required enormous amounts of research to discover. right? Let's say I have a team now at Berkeley. There's a professor and his graduate student who have discovered, this is really cool, how to harness wave technology in a new kind of way. They have discovered there's certain parts of the world that have certain types of waves that crash into sand dunes, and oftentimes in that way they pull sand into the ocean and erode the beach, but also it's enormous amounts of power. So they created a carpet that has pistons underneath it, and they lay this out in the ocean, like right out of the tide, where the tide ends, and as water goes over it, the waves go over it, it captures the energy of the wave. Now, 1 square meter of this stuff can power 2 homes in the US. Imagine just 1 square meter. And if you don't need the energy at the time, it will use reverse osmosis to turn ocean water into drinkable, potable water. So, I mean, it's like double word score right there. And it keeps the sand from eroding, so that's triple word score. Like, that's huge. And it's all research based. Now, they had to spend a lot of money taking the thesis that this would work and creating a prototype to show that it actually does work. And now they have to spend even more money trying to commercialize it, right? So something like that, you are required to build something before you go out and test it, because it is research-based product, right? But many of you guys who are building consumer-based products that are going after consumers, if you can do it without building anything, try it first. The reason why is because consumer-based solutions require behavior changes by the consumer. And consumers are incredibly, incredibly lazy. Even if you say, hey, this is going to bring so much value to you, they still will type in www.google.com rather than use a shortcut because they're just used to doing it, right? It's become this process that they go through and they don't even think about it, right? So you might build something you think is going to be more efficient and better and cheaper and greater for someone, but there's still going to be a huge population that still uses AOL. And they still do. AOL makes crazy amounts of money because a lot of people just don't want to change their behavior. Right? It also explains why Yahoo still exists, is because people don't want to switch their email addresses, right? So there's enormous amount of inertia when you talk about consumer applications and consumer stuff. So rather than waste enormous amounts of time building something and seeing if people will use it, right, will change their behavior, see if you can prove that they will change their behavior if you give them this added value without building the technology, or building a very small, small beta to see if they'll do that without investing an enormous amount in it. And then testing out what motivates them to change over and who can be convinced to change over, and you start now understanding what your customer market will look like, who your target is. You can do a lot of that stuff without investing a whole lot in building a whole platform and wasting a lot of time. So my recommendation, if you're going after consumer market, try those tests first, because you will keep your team happier, because there's nothing worse, and I know a lot of engineers in here, building something that no one uses, right? That totally sucks and it's demoralizing. So if you start by building just something little to see if you can change people's behavior, then and it does work, then you've got something. Remember, all we're doing, if we build something new, is we're trying to shift people's behavior from what they were doing before to what you want them to do. And if you can get enough people to do that, you take revenue stream that was going over here, they're moving now towards you, right? And once you have them coming to you, you can now monetize it. It is like moving the direction of a river towards your business. You have to first prove that those people are movable.
How did you get your best people?
So the reason I teach at UC Berkeley, I'm a Berkeley grad, but 7 years ago when I started my company, nobody was building applications for mobile devices. It was back when you had Nokia, and you guys remember Nokia? They had all these Symbian devices, and they're using Java, and no one knew how to build these mobile apps. And so I couldn't hire anyone in the market who had that expertise, and anyone who we could hire wanted way too much money to learn how to do it before, you know, we could even make them productive. So what I thought was, well, and talked to one of my team members, he's like, well, you know, there's classes that they teach at Berkeley on these new technologies that professors don't know anything about because they're so new, but they know students need to learn this if they're going to get a job when they graduate. So maybe you can go and teach this stuff. So I went to the department and said, hey, I don't see a mobile class that you're teaching, would love to teach something. Just as a, you know, just as an alum, I just want to bring value back to the university. I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I started teaching purely as a 15-week interview process to figure out which students to hire, right? And we ended up hiring a bunch of really good people, but the joke was on me because I ended up loving the teaching part of it. So I kept coming back and teaching without getting paid, so I ended up getting the, you know, they got the better end of that deal. Both of my parents are educators, and so yeah, I did a startup kind of to do exactly the opposite of what my parents did. And of course I circled right back and do exactly what they did. So that didn't work as well. But yeah, you have to be creative in knowing where to find the people that you need, providing them with a vision and an incentive for them to join you as a partner in what you're doing, not as an employee, because they will be an employee, they'll get paid, they'll get healthcare or whatever, but you want to position it as, I am on a religious quest to bring this new thing to the world. I want you to join me.
One related question.
Yeah.
Giving stock options to employees, if you can say like a typical shares, not just co-founders, but hiring new people to motivate them. What is the typical share that you can give away to the first employees? Because for instance, AngelList, when you search, there are typical ranges like for first CMO, you give this and that percentage approximately for the app developer, 1 or 2%.
I don't have current information on that, to be fully honest. All of what you see on the internet, like Mika was talking about, those benchmarks start after your Series A. After your Series A, that's when you hire a professional CMO, possibly a VP of engineering. If your CTO isn't a great manager, right, then that's when you hire the VP of engineering. And a lot of your C-suite people, and those people tend to have business school backgrounds, and they are very much eager to have been benchmarked against other people in that industry. So that's why you have lots of data on the internet about how to pay those people in terms of stock and pay, right? But prior to that, when you're in the angel round and you're trying to incent people, that is kind of, it's a dark art. Number one thing is you make sure that people don't share that information. It's just, you don't want people to let each other know. So you make sure that everyone considers it confidential information. The other thing, if you have a co-founder, I'm a big believer in equality. If they are a true co-founder, you should go in 50-50, right? Even if they're doing all the coding and you're doing all the business stuff, no one should be picking through what percentage of this or that. If they're a true co-founder, that's it. Now, if they are amongst many co-founders, let's say you have a whole team that you consider co-founders, you find a way to break it down. One of the ways that they were doing it, and the first company I did it this way, is that the person who's doing the most work, who's the most important to the survival of the company, gets 50%, and then the remaining team gets the other 50%. And then the next most important person gets 50% of that remaining 50, and then the rest of the team gets the 25%. And you do that all the way down until you have divvied it up.
People are concerned that I will be giving him shares and he will be leaving. So if we say a few words about the vesting, the normal mechanism.
Yeah. So even if you're a founder, thinking about that, I'm missing all these things. It's good that you're asking these questions. Even your founder shouldn't be vested. So when you get your Series A round of money, your VCs will give you a vesting schedule, even if you don't have one, because they can't have you leave unless they want you to leave. So in that way, they will lock you in, saying, yeah, it says that you have all of your shares, but we're going to take all those back as part of the deal. And we're going to say only a third of that is vested, and then the rest has to vest over time, right? You can negotiate how much that split's going to be. Then you're like, wow, that sucks. Like, there's no way I'm going to sign that. They're like, well, then, go find someone else's money. And you quickly learn that everyone has this, because you are the company at that point. when you're that young as a firm. So they're going to insist that you get locked in. As a retort to that, what I would recommend that you all do is have an employment contract in place when you get your Series A. And probably before that, have an employment contract that says, if I get fired or laid off by the company, I fully vest. I'm telling this to you as a personal experience. I had to get lawyers because I did not do this, but apparently this is standard that you have in your contract as a founder, that if you are forced out, they call it double trigger, there's a double trigger there, you fully vest, which forces them to negotiate with you if they do push you out. Oftentimes you don't get 100% of the shares if they push you out early.
Concerning talking to investor as a topic, what is the minimum customer validation in terms of downloads for B2C or the minimum validation for B2B before trying to talk to VCs or angel investors?
Yeah, good question. So let me finish the first question, which is the vesting schedule is 4 years typically, and it's a 1-year cliff before you see your stock. So after that first year, the first day after that first year, you typically get a full year's worth vested immediately after that first year of working. That's everyone in your team. You want to keep it fairly standard. And then you vest the same amount every month until the remaining, you run out of that 4 years, right? The question around when are investors interested in investing in you, it depends on how hot your market is. So if you have 4 competitors in a new market, right, where let's say it's getting really hot, you have Forbes talking about this new market, that it is going to be huge. So Vine was one of the companies that was in this market, but there was another one called Color. Color raised something like $15 million, something ridiculous. They completely ate it though. They raised too much money. That's another thing. Don't raise too much money. And don't force unnaturally high valuation, because if something goes wrong, you will have a down round and you have nothing. So this is a really important thing. But because it got really what they call frothy just means people go insane. Valuations are crazy, like WhatsApp. You'll hear investors when they say, well, why were they acquired for 19 billion? You'll usually hear, well, the market's been pretty frothy. Just you can't figure out what the valuations and things are because it's too competitive and people are making irrational decisions on valuation. So when you have a frothy market and you have irrational decision making, you end up having one company get funding and the other companies that are in the market instantly get VCs who lost that first deal coming in, and no matter what the state of that company is, they will invest in that company because they want to beat the other company that just got the money, right? And so even if you have no customers, they might come to you and invest in you. And I've seen that many times, just out of luck, just pure timing and luck, that you get this enormous valuation. Now, you have to be careful too, because you might prematurely get this money and now you're making really irrational decisions, right? Because money, if you've ever seen the Lord of the Rings, you make irrational decisions when you have something and you just start spending it on things, right? So you want to be very careful and you want to stay within kind of the mean when you're doing things. What was it? Was there another question in there about? Typically
Section for B2B or B2C, how many users should I have or customers in order to be interesting for?
Yeah. So if you're doing like a enterprise play, you want to make sure that you have at least 3 or 4 validated customers who will be a reference for you. That's kind of the number that I saw. And they should be kind of in the same area. They shouldn't be peppered all over the place, because you're looking to provide VCs patterns so they can turn around and tell their investors, hey, this company has found a pattern, we're investing in that pattern. Again, with the market, right? Those 3 things, they're saying that there's a market. So go for 3 or 4 customers that look very similar to each other. Not exactly in the same industry, but maybe all are consumer product companies that you're selling to, or all like finance types of companies, right? For consumer-focused you're actually looking for delta. It's not necessarily a number that you're going for, but you're wanting to show that month after month you're growing in a very potentially, geometric way. And if you can show this curve and get people excited that every month it's going to be even more crazy, and we need the investment to support that crazy, that's the highest likelihood of success, is to show that kind of curve. I don't know exactly when on that curve that you're going to get funding, but it may be some kind of exogenous event where a competitor gets invested in, or Google announces they're going into that market, or Google announces they're going to invest in that market, right? That could be what triggers people to make the decision.
But how many, tens of thousands of users, or what the user growth should be on month basis to be at least considered? Because if I have, for instance, 1,000 downloads, then no one will talk to me because this means nothing.
Yeah, so I would say, after the third month after launch and you're starting to really see a spike, that's when you would go start fundraising, right? You want to see a pattern emerge, because if you don't have a pattern and you go talk to VCs, they'll say, I'll wait till there's a pattern.
And how many users? 100,000 million?
Yeah, I would say, I can't give you a number, but I would say if you are growing orders of magnitude a month, so you start out with like 10, and then you're going to 100 to 1,000, you're starting to see that kind of delta, then that's when I would start looking for money. Right? And that they're continuing to use the solution. If you have high churn, where people are downloading your app or testing your solution, but they're not coming back, that's not a pattern. That's a bad pattern, right? So you need to have people who are engaged in continuing to use your solution.
You mentioned something about competitors.
Yeah.
That they share resources for marketing. Can you give the example, like how did it work, and if you actually
Yeah.
told to each other that you are going to do it, or it was just accident?
It kind of happens a little bit naturally. It's kind of organically. Give you an example of our industry. We were at the time, we made a strategic decision that we were not going to put ourselves in we were enterprise. And in enterprise software, there are people called analysts who make their money by predicting what is happening in technology, being able to rate the technology providers, the vendors of that technology, and say, hey, Kellogg or Pepsi, why don't this technology is ready for you to buy, right? They make recommendations. And so most enterprise software companies like ours would go to these analysts and make sure that they knew about you so they can write about you. They want to write about you because if you're new, they want to be seen as being cutting edge and knowing where new technology is coming from. And then what ends up happening is they tell you, hey, yeah, I ran into another company doing something similar to what you're doing. Of course, the analyst is talking to them as well. So the analyst is trying to find ways to describe what you do. And if you're doing something absolutely brand new, okay, just a brand new idea, by definition, there are no words for it. Think about that, right? There are no words because it's new. So you have to make stuff up. You have to come up with your own definitions. You have to come up with your own words that you will describe this new thing with, right? You're creating new language. So that whole process only becomes effective if other people adopt those words and those definitions. And that's what we did. And a lot of people do this. Lots of marketing agencies, if you pay them a lot of money, will help you reposition and create a whole new market. And so we were being thrown into this old market called mobile device management. And we thought, well, this is not a really good description of what we do. It's the same solutions, similar solutions that our customers would be evaluating, right? Because we were selling into the IT department. So the IT would be looking at MDM solutions as well, device management solutions, as well as our technology, and we didn't want to be compared to them because we didn't have all of their features and functions, and we would always lose if we were compared to the incumbent technologies. So we decided to create something very clever called mobile app management, MAM, right? Which was similar enough so that people would see, oh, there's MDM and there's MAM, but then we said we were better at solving this particular, very pernicious problem that MDM wasn't designed to solve. Now, the language is very important there, right? We didn't say they're incompetent, they suck. What we said was it wasn't designed to do this. And so if you get a solution in MDM to solve an MAM problem, it will be because it will only work if someone has kludged things into this old solution that was designed for something else, and that it won't be sufficient in solving your problem. So we let the language provide some fear to the people who are going to purchase the software to show that we were different enough, and we also then had to argue we were sufficiently better at solving this problem, and we did. We had several large companies, Pepsi being one of them, that purchased our solution to solve this problem, right? And then we had two other competitors pop up about 3 or 4 months after we did, and they started using the same language. In fact, our company was called, our company and our product was called App Central. And one of our competitors named their product App Center, which is illegal because that was totally ripping off our brand. And then we had another technology that was part of it called App Guardian. It guards your app. And we called it an app wrapper for your application, right, for your enterprise app. They called their version of it App Wrapper, right? So they literally went to our website. We know this because we've since talked to them. They basically copied our language. We were upset, but also it was helpful. I look at it back at it now, but it was helpful because it allowed analysts and customers to have a common language. We could show that we were the originators of this, and the analysts also said that we were the originators of this. And so we became experts because we were the ones who invented this, and we're the most forward. Right? So, you know, I can't remember the original question, but you know, the whole process of creating your own space allows for you to you know, get customers who are really looking for this technology. But it only works if your competitors also suggest that this is the same language they're using, because it gives credibility to what you're talking about. So we kind of colluded without actually proactively colluding. It all happened with the conversations we had with analysts, and because we all knew that we needed common language because our customers were going to compare us to each other, right? So it just kind of happens that way. But they became really important in making us the gold standard in that industry.
When you were a hard worker at the time, did you keep some work-life balance? Did you work out, or did you just spend 20 hours a day?
Yeah.
How did it work, and what do you recommend us?
Yeah, so not that you can tell now, but I used to go work out every day because my team would force me to do that because I'd be so high strung, going all day long. And so I would go to the gym late at night to just kind of blow off steam. So that's key. I don't actually believe, and this is going to be on tape, so it'll be weird in the future when I change my attitude on this, but I don't think the work-life balance thing is like real. Like there is a standard for anyone. I don't think you should benchmark yourself against somebody else who seems to have it all and balance it all, right? Everyone has a different balance, right? Everyone has a different, different schedule. We all have had different experiences to produce who we are, right? Even if you all grew up in the same town in Czech Republic, you're still going to have different parents and different experiences, different meals, and all kind of leads you to being slightly different from everybody else, or a lot different. So I think you will have to define your own work-life balance and be okay with it. You will know when it's not in balance, if it's not what you want, right? You'll get sick. You'll get sick more frequently. You'll not enjoy what you're doing, whether it's with your family or friends or with your coworkers, if the balance is off. But your balance is going to be completely different. It could be 99% at work and 1% at home, right? But it's up to you to define what that is. It's kind of like your job to figure what that's going to be for you.
And Czech company are raising money in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so that's going to be tough. It's tough for anyone raising money, and it's also extremely. I mean, the valley is at this point, so frothy with companies, so many startups running around all over the place. And so these VCs have, well, two things happening. This huge surge of startups that have happened in the last few years. And now there's yet another surge that's happening. That was caused by the mobile explosion, the explosion of SaaS, the fact that there's Heroku and Amazon, and you can start a company without any physical presence for anything, right? You could be a remote team and don't have any servers, and it's just like, you're as real as Amazon, because I've never been to Amazon's offices. No, I have, but you know, I've never been to their servers. I don't actually know what they own, right? So, because of this explosion, and anyone can do this, fast broadband, fast servers are all over the place, you have this incredible supply of companies. What happened after 2008 is that lots of VC firms shut down, a lot of them. So I'm talking some very well-known firms had to close down because they weren't getting any returns for their investment, right? So now you have this incredible imbalance between those people who have money and those people who have an opportunity. And so the people who have money have everything to pick over, you know, and they can choose just the companies, the best companies. And in fact, if they only had the Silicon Valley to come over for opportunities, they wouldn't have to look anywhere else because there's just enough stuff there. I don't want to discourage you from fundraising in the Valley, right? But I don't want you guys to look at it as your savior, like somehow this is going to be the thing that is going to save your company or going to be it, right? I think the best entrepreneurs are ones who look to solve their own problems. They, of course, reach out to other people for that help, but they're not going to be reliant on kind of the wives' tale that, hey, I'll go to the Silicon Valley and everything will be fixed, and I'll find the land of venture capitalists and they'll all love it, right? These are reality and gravity all exist in the Valley too, right? And so if people aren't responding to what you do here, the chances are they're not going to respond to it there, and they'll just be more brutal and honest about it, right? So fundraising in the Valley, I think it's important so that you get a global context. Does your opportunity have a global market? Do the other VCs see what you're doing here in the Czech Republic? Do they see other companies in other regions? That's kind of, having traveled through all these different countries, I'm starting to see lots of common opportunities popping up regionally. And they can give you more sense of what your competition, global competition is looking like. And it's a great experience to learn how to pitch to VCs. But again, it's not going to be your complete solution. Though I have helped, and I've seen several companies do it well. German companies have a fairly good track record of doing it. They also have a country brand behind their engineering. So there's something to that. I've seen. See what other countries. Some companies out of China, but there's funds specifically for Chinese companies that are emerging. So it does happen and it does work. You just can't rely on that and think that that's going to solve everything. You still have to be really good, and probably you have to be better than the American company that's doing exactly what you're doing, because you live 6,000 miles away from the Valley, and it may be just easier for the VC firm to go with the local team because they can keep a closer eye on it than one that might be doing a little bit better in the Czech Republic. So you're going to have to be that much better in order to get their attention and to get their money.
If Czech companies are not discouraged by what you are saying and they want to go there, so what is the minimum period they need to give it a try, like half a year, and what will be the associated burn rate, how much they should put aside in order to give it a half a year, for instance, to try?
Well, I would do 3 weeks first, just to go see the place, have some meetings, build a basic network, and understand how the place functions. You have to have a car. I don't know if you guys all drive, but in the Valley, there's really not very good transportation, and the companies you're going to go to, from Facebook to Google to whomever, it's going to be miles of driving to get there. It's also really not impressive. The Valley is essentially old strawberry fields that have been turned into office parks, and fairly close. So it doesn't feel like you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go to the land of, where is everything? Like, you turn around and you're like, wow, this is just a parking lot full of really expensive cars. Right? So it's not that impressive, though San Francisco has become much more of a draw now. So apparently more money was put into startups in San Francisco than in the South Bay, which is the core of Silicon Valley. So San Francisco is getting much more exciting, and you might spend some time there. But I would recommend spending about 3 weeks just getting acclimatized, building out your network, letting people know you exist, and then coming back home saying, is that going to be a worthwhile investment for us to go for longer? And then you build a plan on how you're going to spend 6 months really trying to make it a business. And there's things that you should know. Very few companies come to the Valley and set up shop and are really successful in the US. Right? Rarely happens. What you need to do is lower your expectations and say, I'm going to the Valley to do one of a few things. One is validate whether the US is the right next market for us. And most companies will find out they're not ready for it, or that the market's not ready for it. Right? They're doing something that is different or unique, right? That the market has yet to really respond to. So answering that question, is that the right market for us? The other thing is, you can go there to figure out if you have product market fit, right? If your business even, has a global market, if it's just kind of quirky for your own country. And so that's the other thing. So I would go to the Valley to try to answer questions of whether the US market's ready for you, if you have product market fit. If the market is ready for you, that's when you need to, that's the 6 months of trying to figure out, okay, what kind of organization do we want to set up in the US? Do we just want a sales team? Do we want to have a bigger team there? Do we want to be in New York? Do we want to be in San Francisco? If you're doing advertising-based stuff, there's as much of an argument to be in New York as it is to be in San Francisco. Right? Probably more, because Madison Avenue, you've got about 100 different ad agencies, and most of the money that's spent on large brands are there, right? It should be about discovery. It shouldn't be about, we've already made a decision, we're going to set up shop. You will fail if you go and do it that way. It should be, I want to answer a question.
One more thing, that is easier for female entrepreneurs to get a US partner, because that will look more interesting for investors to have like a US co-founder, because we invested into your company from Berkeley.
Yeah.
Antoine is a French co-founder. There is some US guy who worked for Google, and they raised 7 million Czech crowns in like 2 weeks time from one high profile from the angel investor from MakerBot. So this can happen, but it helps to have someone a local partner.
Yeah, so there's 2 things that were happening in that. One is they met with like 50 people in the course of 2 weeks, and they got a bunch of people excited about what they're doing. Their product is a drone that has essentially a GoPro camera on it that follows you as you're doing high performance sports, like skateboarding or snowboarding or jumping off of cliffs. It will follow you and videotape you as you're doing that kind of stuff, right? Probably to capture your death, if it was me doing these kinds of sports. But it's kind of like a GoPro, but kind of having an existential experience watching you do that, right? So they caught a really good wave. It was really exciting about drone technology. Amazon was moving into it. There's a lot of like secretive things going on, and so it was a really good time for them. But the other part too is one of the co-founders is French. He did his undergrad at Berkeley, so he has a US degree, but he has a really thick French accent. And so that was difficult, because that signals that he may be French. Right? And the French don't have the best track record of being successful entrepreneurs in the Valley. And that's just kind of a stereotype that's built over time. And so his co-founder is your traditional Google educated. He did all of his internships at Google, turned down a job at Google, brilliant guy, does all the technology from hardware to software, and he balanced him out, right? If you look at my co-founder, who was a German professor in CS, thick German accent, brilliant, but super inappropriate. Like in meetings, he would make Hitler jokes. Like the first time you meet a VC and you make a Hitler joke, I don't know how to sell that. Like I don't know how to fix that one. Like I'm like, thank you guys, I'm just gonna leave now, right? I mean, just like, how do you fix that kind of behavior? But we found a way to make it work because we balanced each other out. And so I think to Mikhail's point, is if you have a thick accent or you think you're very culturally Czech and you think you need to have some balance, it does make a lot of sense to bring on team members, maybe even a co-founder, who can balance that out. And I don't just mean a US one, but maybe a German one or something, some other balance that will, when you go to a VC, they'll see, yeah, these two are very different and they work together well, and they're going to bring some, something new to the market. Yeah. And I think there was a question over here.
Yeah, just regarding the previous question about the place. The market is the same in Valley, in Seattle, in New York.
No.
So if it will something not work in Valley, don't throw it away and just move to New York to revalidate, or?
So the reason the Valley is really the place to go is that the Valley is incredibly promiscuous. They're willing to play with anybody's toys. And so you will find people who will try your technology, who will be a first customer, who will beta test stuff, because that's the culture there, is that part of being competitive is being the first there, and they're willing to take some risks, right? Because they know they've got to be innovative. So if you can't make it in the Valley, the chances are there's no other market where you're going to find people who are that early adopter mindset and willing to take a chance. So the Valley is kind of the place. I mean, if you were to try New York first and then go to the Valley, that would be, that would be worth it. The other thing that I do want to point out is the Valley is full of customers who understand the game that you're playing. If you are in the enterprise space, and this is generalities, I'm now playing with some stereotypes here, but in New York is known to be incredibly transactional. It's all hardcore business. You've got people who negotiate the crap out of everything, and it's all about if I can get the best deal. And they will negotiate, try to get you down to zero, right? Because they want to feel like, yeah, I got a really good deal, and you got a good deal because you got a really big name as on your website as a customer, and that's why, you should give us this thing for free, right? What they don't understand, which Silicon Valley companies understand, I don't even know if they know it consciously, but they know that if they negotiate you down too far, you will die as a company, and they will have implemented software in their company that no longer has someone managing the development of it, right? So I have had customers in my first, getting my first couple customers who knew this and made sure that they paid us more than we started negotiating. They were like, is that going to be enough to cover, the things that we're going to need? Is that going to be enough? Because I've got budget, I can get more budget, right? I have this thing I can spend. I just need to know this is going to be able to keep you guys alive, right? This is how they talk there, right? They think about that if they adopt this new technology, it's going to be part of their business. 100,000 of their employees are going to use this thing. And if they've negotiated you down and been such a pain in the ass to work with that you have folded as a company, they are now stuck with technology by definition that is legacy. And they have no one to work on. They have now purchased bespoke custom app, right? So this is why the Valley is so powerful, is that even your customers understand they are helping you grow into something big, right? And that's a totally different culture, a different mindset that you will eventually appreciate if you work with companies there. And that's why there's so many companies that pop up and are successful, is because their customers help support them in their growth.
And when talking to, what is another problem when Czech companies talk to US investors in the Valley, they say, oh, we need this and that amount of money. And from US perspective, from US investor perspective, he sees, oh, they cannot make it with this money because they don't realize there is a big difference in the wages. If you can say a few words about that, how to be right about the financial needs of the company.
Yeah, if you're going to be talking about how much money you need, that should be in the later meetings with these investors, because you're going to need more time with them to explain why you need the money, how you're going to spend it, and just those realities that people don't get paid as much here, right? And so I would avoid talking about how much money you're raising. Really, just you can be kind of high level. We're looking for this kind of range, those early meetings. And then when you get to the point where you're really negotiating, they will give you the time to explain all of that stuff. The difficulty with investors is they've seen so many presentations, and I see probably a dozen a day, right? And there are very few times I see a presentation I haven't seen before. And that's the same thing with VCs, is they're going to see a slide that they think they've seen before and say, I've seen that. Go to the next one, next one. I'm sure if you've seen VC, been in a meeting where they've done that, that totally frazzles you because you're like, I had it all kind of timed and I knew what the next thing was, and I had information that he doesn't know, but I wasn't able to share that, and now I can't reference back to it. You get all kind of like all over the place. So VCs tend to not listen to your entire pitch. So if you get to a point where you've got them talking about how much you need, they will give you the time to explain all of that stuff. So I would make sure you have a very clear, clean story about the check culture, how much people get paid here, how how you've built your revenue model and your cost structure to be able to leverage those advantages that you have here in Czech Republic. So you have to have the opportunity to explain it. Someone else had a question over here?
Just related.
Oh, so he was first. Yeah.
Would you have some advice for engineers, how to approach the potential customers, how to basically talk to them and sell the product? Because the engineers usually concentrate on features and stuff like this. It's probably not the best way how to do it.
Yeah. So engineers appreciate detail and specifics and technical like numbers and statistics. If you're selling to someone who is buying, who is not technical, even if they are technical, the first meeting, they're not going to want numbers. But if you're selling an opportunity that's more software or efficiency types of solutions, you're going to want to talk about how it's going to improve their lives. They're going to save 2 hours out of the day, right? They're going to be able to save all of this money, right? This is about value proposition of how it affects their lives, right? Not about this clocks in at like 4.2 megahertz, blah, 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 blah. Then everyone glazes over with that. They don't know how to internalize that information. So you want to focus on talking about how this will impact their lives. When you get into the second and third meetings, that's when you get more specific. But you always want to think about, if I am this person, not me, but I am this person I'm talking to, what is it that they're going to need in order to not just make a decision, but here's kind of the trick about selling, is the person you're selling to is not the decision maker. Decisions today are made by committee. And so if you tell a story to this person that you're selling to, that this person cannot turn around when you're not there and tell that story to all the other decision makers on their team, from their boss to the people that work for them to the other people on potentially the committee. If they can't turn around and explain it to them in a simple, easy way, he won't do it because he doesn't want to look dumb, right? That he didn't really pay attention or understand how the technology works. So you have to think about, what is it going to take for this person to be able to retell my story to other people while I'm not there? So that's my best advice to you, is to always have empathy about what the other guy is going to need to do and talk at that level so he can turn around and repeat it to someone else. You're
Well, this is related back to the previous one.
Okay.
When you were describing actually your discussion with the investor. So I understand that as you describe the whole process, that it's even better to play with the old cards, say open cards, to explain culture, pricing, the salary here, and getting involved and let him suggest practically what the investment should be. Am I correct?
Well, if you get to a point in the relationship where you're starting to synthesize together and create and come up with solutions together, that's a good sign. And definitely having them invest some of their knowledge and their experience into how to design a funding model or cost structure, that's good, because they're now investing their brain power to this. So that's a good thing. That doesn't mean that you give up control of that strategy and that design to them, because there's information that you know that they will not know about the Czech economy and the way jobs work here. So you don't want to outsource that to them. You want them to get involved in some way, but it still should be you driving it. Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, on a different topic of funding, can you talk a little bit about angel and seed? We tend to have a different problem. We have people who only want to get us Series A, but we need seed to get us to realization.
Yeah. So one something not to do is to take seed money from a VC firm. So there's a lot of VC firms who have gone out and they're investing in startups because they realize they have to get early into the deal in order to win the best deals, right? If I give you $500,000, you're guaranteed to come to us to get your Series A if you take our seed money, right? But what's happened is companies like Sequoia and others that are in that bracket, the top bracket, they've started doing this as well. A few years ago, they started investing at the seed level. But their strategy is they will put seed money into a bunch of companies. And the best companies go to Sequoia. They go and try to, because that's one of the top firms, they try to get their money. And so a lot of really good, healthy companies go to get seed money from Sequoia. But out of the 20 they invested, they might only choose 3 or 4 to put in a Series A. And if you're not one of those 3 or 4, you still have reached your goals and you're still making money and you're ready to get a Series A. You go out to other VCs having been turned down by the guy that gave you the seed. They're like, great, hey, you've been invested by Sequoia. How much are they going to come in for the Series A? You're like, well, they're not. And you can't explain that. That kills the conversation. No one's going to come in because they know Sequoia has information that they don't. And that information led them to not invest in you, right? So you get screwed. There's no way that you can get around that, and it becomes, like we've seen companies get stuck in that cycle, right? So don't take VC money, or don't take seed money from a VC firm because they can, unless they say they're in contract going to commit that they are going to follow along to the next round, regardless of what regardless of what happens, right? That's very helpful. If they commit to that. In terms of angels, I don't know what the angel culture is here, but a couple of general recommendations. Get angels who know technology, who have invested in technology before. We've had several teams have been thrown money at them by real estate agents because they've made lots of money and they see this startup world is where everyone's making millions of dollars. I should get in there too. Real estate is not the same as technology. You don't have the same cycles, the timing is different, product is different, sales is different. And if you've ever met a real estate agent, they're super aggressive. They pick up the phone and call you every hour. Are we billionaires yet? Are we billionaires yet? So if they're not in the industry, they can either be extremely toxic because they're sucking up a lot of time. And they can also influence your other investors in your investor pool. So you could have that happen. But also, you are losing the opportunity to have someone who can add value as a team member. These tech people can come along who started a company prior. They invest in you. You can say, hey, I had the CEO of this company as an angel investor. And that helps you get your Series A and increases your valuation because people then think, oh, you've got some really expert people who have validated what you're doing, and we think this might be even more valuable if the guy who invented, say, invented antivirus, right, is in your security company. They're going to be more likely to invest in you and think, wow, these guys have more information than I do. This guy who invented this stuff, I bet he knows what he's talking about. So it helps validate you. So it's a missed opportunity to get people like that in. Now I know the Czech Republic, you're not going to have as many of those people, but you guys are known for your security software here, right? So there is a way, if you're in security, to be able to do that. But choose your angels wisely. It's really important to do that. And there's whole websites like AngelList and whatnot that do provide you with a network of people to get money from. And then there's also crowdfunding, though I don't know how that works here. But if you have a physical product-based company, that's also a really good way of getting traction, customer proof that people will pay for it, and then other investors will be more inclined to invest because you've essentially validated, again, the market. That's all they want to see.
One question today. We spoke with Anwar about VC, what to tell him when we are raising, for instance, I want $1 million. So when we raise the topic, what to say or what not to say, because I want to raise $1 million to build new functionalities, which is like a no-go. So if you can say a few words about what to stress when we are raising $1 million or more.
Yeah, so venture capitalists do not invest in product development. So they might say hey, we come in early. We're an early stage VC firm. And then you ask, how early is early? And they said, when you're getting customers, and you say, well, we're pre-revenue, or do you invest in pre-revenue? They're like, oh yeah, we invest in pre-revenue companies. And then you ask them, what do you define as pre-revenue company? Like, oh, generating something like $50,000 to $60,000 in revenue. So they define pre-revenue as making revenue, but not enough to cover your costs. So their definition of pre-revenue is pre-profit, actually, right? So they don't necessarily, they rarely, I've not seen many investing companies that are still developing their product, right? One big exception would be the guys who did the ocular 3D vision thing that Google or Facebook just bought for ridiculous billions of dollars. Yeah, Oculus, yeah, they, they're still building out their product. I mean, it's still giving people headaches, right? They haven't quite figured out how it's going to work. But for the most part, they will invest in companies that have figured out what they call product market fit. They have enough customers in a particular area that prove that the product that they've created has a market that's not going to really require much more development to win, right? Because they want to make sure that the money they give you is going to go towards growth, not towards building a new product or building product, right? That's what they believe the angel environment is for. The angel community is to fund development of the product. That this creates problems if you have a life science company. I don't know if you guys are doing life science, but this is why drugs and medical devices, a lot of them fail because governments pay for the research to prove that the science works, but to commercialize it, you have to go through lots of clinical trials. Governments oftentimes will not pay for those clinical trials. Pharma companies and VCs refuse to pay for that because they believe that's still research. So you have this whole area where they call the valley of death, and companies die because they can't find anyone to fund that next step. So, this is difficult. Different companies with different areas will have to struggle with these issues. But when it comes to fundraising, my recommendation is have a network of other entrepreneurs that are also fundraising or have fundraised, and you meet with them on a regular basis to make sure you don't go insane. Because you'll get a lot of no's, and if you commiserate with other people who are getting no's, it will feel a lot better because you realize it's not you or your opportunity, but it's that this whole process can be painful. I'm not sure if that answered the question. Any other? Yeah.
I will go back from investors to customers. If you're an enterprise startup here in CE, you have tested your concept and you think it might work in the US, or at least it's worth trying, but you don't want to invest much. You want to efficiently find out and validate somehow. There are multiple ways how to do it. Some of startups try to find investors in the US and to help them, to do this. Plus, as you told, it's a long process, and especially if you're enterprise, it's the same with the customers. It takes months to get even the first customer. So, and the expenses in the US are quite high for us, and so on. So, what from your experience, what is in nutshell, the biggest do's and don'ts in this process? What would you advise?
Okay, the biggest don't. I hate starting with the negative, but it's probably the most important. Is do not hire a consultant in the US to do this stuff for you, right? Thinking that they're going to handle everything. You have to be on the ground. If you hire a consultant, they can open doors for you, but you're the one who's going to be doing the selling. And you do need to be there to watch them as they're doing this stuff, right? So that's the number one don't. I'm not going to lie, the sales cycle for enterprise software, enterprise solutions is just long. Regardless of whether you're a Czech company or an American company, typically 6 months as the minimum to get a pilot, right? So you're gonna struggle to try to make, get inroads into places, and also avoid using partners and channels until you figure out how to sell it, so that you can teach these people how to sell it. Right? That's one of the mistakes we made, is that all these channel partners wanted to sell our product, but they didn't know how to, right? So we wasted a lot of time setting up these relationships. So that's another recommendation. So it's just going to take a lot of on-the-ground work, and you have to commit to first figure out if the market is right for you. And once you make that decision, you're going to have to invest a lot of money and time doing it. And one thing you may, I don't know what your solution does, but what you may be able to do is find another company that's complementary to you, that solves a problem that that same IT manager or the same purchaser in the company would be purchasing, and maybe partnering up with them and being able to either, go in as a bundle, or be able to, buy their customer list from them and be able to try to sell into where they've sold, right? So the biggest time suck that you're gonna have is trying to figure out who at these companies to sell to, right? It's not like, hey, I'm gonna sell to Pepsi, where they've got 100,000 people in their core corporate business, and then another 250 all over the world in other parts of the business. So who do you talk to, right? So you gotta find ways to find those people, and it'll take the most time to cultivate that group. But you'll have to find clever ways to be able to reach who you want, specifically who you want to talk to, and then it's still 6 months.
And another big mistake is to expect from US investor helping you actually, because they have so many investments, like big investment firms, that they don't have people on the ground. They just give you the money, but it is not very smart money. It is just the money, and because they believe that you can execute. So don't bet on the US investors helping you.
Yeah, so it may be the case that they can introduce you to Google or Facebook, and that's helpful, right? But they're not going to be your sales team. They're not going to be your BD team, and you don't want them to be. You just don't want them to be. Some people will take money from strategics. I know this is Telefonica's offices, right? And if you take money from, say, like T-Mobile or from LG or Samsung, which they all have investment arms, that comes with an enormous cost. That's great. You might be getting lots of money from them. There's two things you may end up getting. One is you may end up getting just a single customer, because they won't let you have any other customers, because you're going to be doing, oftentimes they invest in you because they have an ulterior motive, or pretty explicit, we want your solution for our customers, and then they become your only customer, and then you start designing stuff just for them. They're not paying you what the typical company would pay you because they're your investor, and suddenly you become the development arm for one of these companies.
Not the case with Telefonica.
Well, yeah, except for Telefonica, because they have a whole, I'm selling it. But a lot of these handset manufacturers, a lot of the software companies, that's what ends up happening. The other thing that happens is that some potential customers of yours may not want to play with you because you've taken money from what they view as a competitor, right? So they will look for another company that's in the space to support, and that happens all the time. So you want to be careful with that, of who you take money from. But certainly don't rely on any of them to provide you with customers. Again, this is, I guess, let me put it this way. Just because you get money, just because you get customers, just because you move to the US or whatever, these things don't solve problems. They give you some extra resources for you to solve the problems. But don't rely on them as, I've made it. And that happens with lots of companies. They get a $5 million check from a VC firm, and they're like, ooh, we made our goal. And then they wake up the next day and they're like, then now what, right? It's only, money is fuel for you to reach your goals. And you shouldn't lose sight of that once you get that, right? So that's a key thing, is you still have to be reliant on yourself. So that's all you got, is your team to execute these things. These other people you bring in, they're not primary players. They're people who provide you with more fuel to be able to get to your next gas station. Any other questions?
Like to arrange startups, maybe to help startups?
Yeah, so I am part of, on top of being at UC Berkeley, I'm also part of USMAC, which is a a group in the U.S. that brings entrepreneurs from around the world to the Valley to do just that, to take 3 weeks or 6 months to figure out if the U.S. market is the right one for them, and also to help them in general, a lot of basic entrepreneurship skills, help you with the cultural aspects that you might be facing with selling internationally. And so what you saw here, we do boot camps that last much longer, and we unpack lots of these topics. And as part of USMAC, we've partnered with Czech Invest. And Mikhail, you want to give a little detail about the okay. Well, there's Czech Start, right? Which is Czech what?
Czech ecosystem.
Yeah. Czech ecosystem. Yeah. So if you are, I'm not doing a very good job selling this, but it's a program that if you are a startup, if you qualify, you go through an interview process. If you qualify, you get lots of mentoring hours with American entrepreneur mentors like myself and several others to help you either get into the U.S. market, explore it, figure out what your next step might be. In some of the teams that I've worked with, they have had issues anywhere from figuring out who their customer should be to what their product should really look like, what market they should go after, where they should set up their headquarters, should they have employees in different regions, helping them solve some of these questions. The approach that we take is that we try not to solve these problems for you, because we're not always going to be there, right, physically, or this program only lasts, I think, 6 to 8 months for a team. What we're trying to do is help you make better decisions. And that's the whole goal, is that you need to be self-sufficient, self-learning entrepreneurs. And if we make you codependent on our help, that's not going to help you out at all. So our whole goal is to help you make more rational, better, and faster decisions. And at the end, these teams do really, we've seen them do quite well. And we work with teams in Ireland, in Poland. I just came from Lithuania, teams there, and throughout Asia. So the program's great. It's my second time in the Czech Republic, and seeing some of the innovation coming out of here. It's really cool. I mean, it's really amazing stuff that you guys are doing. And if you guys got an opportunity, to work with some entrepreneurs in the Valley who've been here before, gone through this whole process, I think you might be able to grow faster and be, frankly, more confident in what you're doing. The common thread that I see from companies in the Eastern European region is that there's I'd say a self-esteem issue, is that people are not as confident about what they have in the global world, in the global market, right? And I think being exposed to the Valley and to entrepreneurs there, I think you'll find very quickly that you can be competitive, and that there's nothing wrong about being a Czech company. In fact, there's a lot of advantages for being one. And through that process, you may end up becoming just much better at even selling here in the country. Any questions about the program? We'd love to have you guys going.
Other questions? Could you speak more about the mobile, because part of your presentation should be about mobile.
Yeah. So my long and the short of mobile is, if you want to make money, it is not the market to go into. If you build solutions to manage mobile applications or to manage mobile solutions, there's lots of money there. A lot of SaaS businesses that help you with mobile as a topic, devices, softwares, getting SharePoint applications to convert into mobile apps or whatever. There's a lot of money there. But if you build a consumer mobile app, especially a game, it's real. I mean, there's a lottery. It's essentially a lottery. And the people who cash out the lottery, like Zynga, they don't have as much money anymore to cash out on what you've built, right? So it's incredibly frothy. Building a mobile app has become quite easy now. You have everyone in the world who's able to do it, who has an internet connection and $100 for Apple's license, right? So you've got everyone in the world, including the 40 million people who live in Bangalore, all banging out mobile apps. So if mobile is your core, your core area for innovation, it's going to be a challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the competitiveness has made it really, really difficult to even get attention. So there's VC firm, like our VC firm that invested in us is considered the top mobile VC firm in the world, and they will even tell you they are reluctant to invest in mobile-centric companies because of that very issue, right? They tend not to be able to scale, and once they do, suddenly China rips it completely off, right, as the Chinese do, and then make the app either free or kind of waters down the opportunity. So I don't want to discourage you guys. I'm just pointing out that these are the market realities you'll be facing. My recommendation as you go into, if you're doing a mobile app, is that that you need to keep track of churn. High numbers of users, of downloads, used to be a good measure of how well you're doing because people weren't paying attention. Now I'm hearing investors and others all wanting to know what your app usage is, how much churn you have in your application, because that's how they're measuring whether your app is actually sustainable, right? The other side of this is revenue model. Freemium has just been your standard thing that everyone's been throwing out as the revenue model, and that's also getting a little exhausted in the valley. You'll see when you use some of these terms like freemium or in-app purchase. If you have a VC meeting where you're using some of these terms, you will see a reflex in some of them. They'll roll their eyes without knowing they've done that because they've heard that from every single company. So you have to be very careful about how you package what you say because they've seen all of these, right? You have to have something that really catches their eye even to get them in the meeting because they've seen so many of these things, okay? With that said, I've seen some pretty cool things come down the pipe, right, that have been super unique, totally different. Like one team in Berkeley, they are actually a semiconductor company. They, in research, found a way to design a computer chip, a chip that doesn't require any energy, any kind of power. You drop blood on it, and for 30 minutes, the chip itself stratus the blood out in some way, and somehow treats the blood. And then they've created a mobile app that you take a picture of the chip, and it will tell you whether you're HIV positive or not. And it's the confirming test, so it's not looking for the antibody, it's actually seeing the virus in the blood, right? And like, what the fuck, right? Like, who does that? Like, you know, and it's mind-blowing to see that because it's one order of magnitude totally different from what everyone else is doing. So with that, you know, you do see some amazing, incredible things, but when it comes to consumer mobile applications, you've got to do something crazy different. You know, the Shazams of the world, you know, that was a really cool application. And they've now become a platform for advertising, which has been a brilliant move, right? But it's going to be hard pressed to find something that creative. If you have that, come talk to me, because I'd love to see what we can do with you.
Any more questions? Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise your hands and give a big clap to Ken.